I heard my baby cry while the house was already burning. I wasn't inside. I was the mother on the driveway watching her child's window glow orange like the mouth of hell. The sound cut through the sirens, through the wind, through every rule I'd ever learned about running into fire. It was the sound that told me, he's still alive, and I'm not there. Hours earlier, everything had been calm. I'd spent the afternoon folding tiny clothes that smelled of lavender detergent while Ethan repaired the faulty socket in the nursery. He was patient, methodical, the kind of man who tightened every screw twice and still double-checked. "Relax, Grace," he said, sweat on his forehead. "This house will outlive us both." He smiled the way people do when they tempt fate without realizing it. That night, I left for my shift at Charleston General. Ethan kissed our 10-month-old son, Oliver, good night. The baby giggled and reached for his father's beard. I almost stayed, but duty called, and love made me trust that home was the safest place in the world. At 12:46 a.m., halfway through my drive home, a voicemail came in. "There's a fire on Maplewood Lane, 114, occupants possibly inside." 114 Maplewood. My house. The steering wheel vanished beneath my shaking hands. The next few minutes were a blur of red lights, horns, and prayers whispered into empty air. When I turned the corner, the sky itself was on fire. Flames climbed out of the windows, curling into the night like living hands. Neighbors stood wrapped in blankets, faces lit by orange terror. One shouted, "He went back in for the baby." Ethan, always running toward danger, always believing he could beat it. I ran, barefoot, lungs clawing for air thick with gasoline and paint fumes. The front door belched smoke when I yanked it open. Heat slapped me backward. I screamed his name until my throat tore. Then came a bark, short, desperate, determined. From across the street, the Duvalls' golden retriever, Max, sprinted through the haze. Mr. Duval shouted, "No, boy, come back." But Max didn't even glance back. He dove straight into the inferno. The crowd gasped. I stood frozen, caught between instinct and terror, watching that golden blur disappear into black smoke. Seconds turned into forever. The porch creaked, the roof moaned, and then, a crash of shattering glass upstairs. A baby's cry answered it. He was alive. Oliver was alive. I lunged forward again, but two firefighters pulled me away just as the stairwell collapsed in a rush of sparks. I remember biting one of them, trying to break free. "Let me in." "Ma'am, you'll die in there." Maybe that was the point. Through the doorway, a shape emerged. Low, limping, glowing in the firelight. Max. His fur was scorched, his eyes wild with smoke, and clenched in his jaws was the edge of a blanket. Something inside the blanket moved. "Medic!" someone screamed. The firefighters rushed forward. They lifted the bundle from Max's mouth, and a wail rose into the night. Oliver's voice, raw but alive. He coughed, cried again, kicked at the air. Every sound sliced me open and stitched me back together all at once. I fell to my knees beside them, sobbing, thanking, praying. Max stumbled once more, pressed his head against my leg, and collapsed. His breathing slowed. His tail gave one last thump against the ground. The roof roared behind us and folded inward, sparks shooting into the sky like fireworks for the dead. "Where's Ethan?" I choked. No one answered. They carried Oliver to the ambulance, wrapped in silver thermal blankets. His tiny chest rose and fell under oxygen tubes. I followed barefoot through puddles of melted snow. Neighbors watched in silence. Sirens painted everything red and blue and red again. A paramedic asked softly, "Is anyone else inside?" I couldn't say his name. The look in his eyes said he already knew. I sat on the curb, clutching the blanket corner, still wet from Max's saliva. The world smelled of smoke and wet earth. Someone draped a coat around my shoulders, but I couldn't feel its warmth. All I could feel was the empty space where Ethan's voice should have been. Dawn crept pale and cruel. The fire was out. The house was just bones and ash. Steam rose from the ruins like ghosts leaving. A firefighter approached, helmet under his arm. They'd found Ethan near the nursery doorway. He'd been only steps away. I nodded. There were no tears left. They covered Max's body with a station flag. Mr. Duval knelt beside me, whispering. He must have smelled the baby. He just knew. I looked at the still form under the blanket. "You can't teach love like that," I said. "It either burns in you, or it doesn't." When the sun finally broke through the smoke, Its light hit the melted wedding ring they'd recovered from the nursery floor. I picked it up with shaking fingers. It was twisted, scarred, but whole. I slipped it into my pocket, pressed Oliver against my chest, and whispered to the ruins. I'll find the truth. You didn't die for nothing. Behind me, the wind shifted, carrying a faint echo, a single bark rolling through the mist. I turned, but there was only smoke and morning light. Every fire leaves something behind. Sometimes it's ashes. They said I slept for 2 days, but inside that sleep were only flashes of red. Every dream was the same. Ethan turning toward me through the flames, baby in his arms, and then both vanishing before I could reach them. I'd wake choking on smoke that wasn't there. When I finally opened my eyes, the ceiling above me was hospital white, too bright, too clean. Oliver lay in the bassinet beside the bed, tiny fingers wrapped around a tube that fed him air. The monitor hummed softly, a lullaby for the living. A nurse whispered that he was stable, that I should rest. She didn't know rest was impossible when part of you was still inside a burning house. Reporters waited in the hall. Grace Turner, they said, the miracle mother. The woman whose husband died saving his child, whose neighbor's dog became a hero. They wanted words to print, something inspirational to help the town sleep at night. I gave them the only line I could manage. A hero's love doesn't end where the fire does. It sounded good enough for headlines, empty enough not to hurt. At the funeral, they draped Ethan's helmet in black cloth and folded the flag into my shaking hands. The pastor spoke about courage and sacrifice, but all I could hear was the hiss of water on burning wood. I stood with Oliver pressed against my chest, smelling the faint smoke still trapped in his baby blanket. Max's ashes sat in a small urn beside Ethan's photo, a red ribbon tied around the lid. Mr. Duvalls cried harder than anyone. Afterward, the department gave me Ethan's personal effects, his badge, wedding band, and a small metal box from his locker. Inside were spare keys, receipts, and a flash drive marked Maplewood Project in his neat block handwriting. I turned it over in my hand, wondering why a firefighter needed a project file. The nights after that stretched long and hollow. The apartment FEMA found for us smelled of fresh paint and disinfectant, too new to feel safe. Oliver would wake crying at 2 a.m., and each time he did I'd hear another sound beneath his voice, a low bark echoing through the walls. I told myself it was memory playing tricks, but sometimes his eyes would follow something I couldn't see. He'd smile at the air and giggle, and for a moment the room would feel warm, the way the old house used to before everything turned to ash. One rain-heavy afternoon, a knock rattled the door. It was Chief Dalton, Ethan's commanding officer, his uniform pressed too neatly for grief. He offered sympathy that didn't reach his eyes and handed me a manila envelope. Official report, he said. Cause, electrical failure. He paused, weighing his next words. Ethan was a good man. You should let this go. Let what go? I asked. He smiled thinly. Guilt. It eats people alive. Then he left before I could answer. That night, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The folder contained photographs of charred foundations, insurance papers, and typed notes in Ethan's voice. Pattern consistent. Same contractor, same insulation wiring. Dalton signed approvals. Need proof. My stomach twisted. Ethan hadn't been fixing our outlet for safety. He'd been checking if our house was next. I scrolled through image after image until one stopped me cold. A picture of Max sitting beside Ethan's truck, bandana bright against the soot. In the corner of the frame, Ethan had scribbled, "He always knows before we do." The power flickered. A gust pushed through the window though it was closed. Oliver stirred, whimpering. And from somewhere outside, faint but certain, came a single bark. I stepped to the window. The street was empty, rain pouring under the lamplight. Still, I whispered, "Good boy." And for the first time since the fire, I felt something like hope, small, trembling, alive. When morning came, I drove back to Maplewood Lane. The lot was fenced, the house reduced to a skeleton of beams. Wet ash clung to my shoes as I walked the outline of what had been the nursery. In the mud near where Max had fallen, something metallic glinted. I knelt and dug it free, a firefighter's lighter, engraved with Ethan's initials. On the back, scratched by heat, were 2 words he'd carved himself long ago. For truth. I closed my hand around it. Whatever killed my husband hadn't finished with us yet. The fire had taken my home, my sleep, my faith, but it had left me a trail. and I intended to follow it. I lifted Oliver into my arms, kissed his smoke-soft hair, and whispered, "We're going to find out, baby. For Dad. For Max. For truth." The wind rose, scattering ash across the yard like snow. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked once, twice, and the echo carried through the ruins like a heartbeat that refused to die. The world moves strangely after loss. Everything looks the same but feels rearranged, as if someone changed the air while you were asleep. 2 weeks had passed since the funeral, and still, the scent of smoke followed me everywhere, caught in my hair, trapped in Oliver's blanket, hiding in the corners of my mind. I tried returning to the hospital. The fluorescent lights felt harsher now, the monitors louder. My coworkers spoke in softened voices, the way people talk around fresh graves. I lasted 3 hours before stepping outside and sitting on the curb, staring at nothing. That's when Mr. Duval found me. His truck pulled up slow, engine rumbling like an old throat clearing. "Got something for you," he said, holding out a small box. Inside lay Max's collar, charred at the edges, the metal tag blackened but legible. Max on one side, and on the back, a single word I'd never seen before, Guardian. "I didn't engrave that," he told me quietly. "Found it that way when they gave me his things. Don't know who did." The tag felt warm against my palm, almost pulsing. Oliver reached for it, tiny fingers curling around the chain. The moment he touched it, he smiled, a wide, bubbling laugh that hadn't come since the night of the fire. Mr. Duval looked startled. "Would you want to see where he's buried?" I followed him to the field behind his house, where a small stone marked the spot. A red bandana fluttered from a stick driven into the ground. Fresh daisies ringed the dirt. The wind smelled like rain and earth. I knelt, tracing the carved words. He saved them all. Something shifted in me then. Gratitude, grief, and something deeper, like I owed him more than flowers. That night, back in the apartment, I couldn't sleep. The baby monitor crackled with static, soft at first, then louder. Through the fuzz came a sound like panting. Not human, not mechanical, real. My skin prickled. I stared into the tiny camera, half expecting to see flames again. But no, just Oliver asleep, and beside his crib, the faint shimmer of light in the shape of a dog. It flickered, then vanished when I blinked. I sat awake till dawn, heart hammering. The rational part of me whispered about exhaustion, grief, and tricks of the light. But a quieter voice, the one that had carried me through the fire, said, "He's still watching." Morning brought distraction. I took Oliver to visit the fire station for a memorial donation. The men stood in silence when we entered. Photos of Ethan and Max hung side by side on the wall, 2 heroes frozen in smoke-stained frames. Chief Dalton shook my hand, grip firm and too rehearsed. "We're all proud of them," he said, eyes flicking to the baby. "You've got quite the legacy." "Ethan mentioned you were investigating wiring issues," I said carefully. "Was that official?" His jaw tightened. "Not really. Just routine checks. Don't trouble yourself with that, Mrs. Turner. Some things are best left to rest." He dismissed me with a smile too polished to be sincere. As I turned to leave, one of the younger firefighters, Tanner, slipped a folded paper into my hand without a word. I waited until I was outside before opening it. "Check station locker 12 after hours. For truth." The handwriting was Ethan's. That night, I drove back. The station was dark except for a single light above the back entrance. My hands shook as I keyed in the door code Ethan had once shown me. The locker room smelled of smoke and detergent. Locker 12 sat at the end of the row, its metal dented, the name tag half melted. Inside was a flash drive wrapped in gauze. I pocketed it and turned to leave, but the door creaked open. A figure stood there, half-shadowed. "You shouldn't be here," Tanner whispered. "Dalton's got eyes everywhere." "What's on this?" I asked. "Evidence. Ethan found patterns in the fires. Dalton covered them up. That drive, he hid it here the night before." Tanner's voice cracked. "The night before he died." My stomach dropped. "He knew the fire was coming?" Tanner nodded, grief etched in every movement. "He was planning to expose Dalton after his shift. He told me if anything happened, make sure you got that drive." Before I could reply, a noise echoed from the hall. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Tanner's face blanched. "Go. Now." I slipped through the side exit, heart pounding, clutching the flash drive like a heartbeat. Outside, rain began to fall again, washing the ash smell from the air. I pressed the gauze-wrapped metal to my chest, whispering, "Thank you, Ethan. I've got it now." At home, while Oliver slept, I plugged it into the laptop. The screen filled with photos, blueprints, wiring diagrams, and inspection reports stamped approved by D. Dalton. There were notes, too, in Ethan's handwriting. 5 fires in 6 months. All insured through same company. Dalton on every approval form. If I go public, he'll silence me. Must prove intent. Below it, one last line. If I don't make it, trust the dog. Tears blurred the text. My hand trembled as I touched the burn tag beside the keyboard. Trust the dog, I repeated, voice shaking. Max knew. The monitor flickered once, like a wink. Outside, thunder rumbled, the same deep growl I'd heard that night before the fire spread. It rolled through the sky, and for the first time since Ethan died, I didn't feel alone. I looked at the picture of Ethan on the wall, at Oliver sleeping safely in his crib, and then at the faint reflection of a golden shape in the window behind me. A soft bark echoed through the thunder. "I hear you," I whispered. "I'll finish what he started." The lights flickered again, and I could have sworn I saw the shadow of a wagging tail fade into the rain. Rain chased me all the way home that night, a steady hiss that sounded too much like the fire. The flash drive burned a line through my jacket pocket as if it still held heat from Ethan's hands. When I closed the apartment door behind me, the quiet hit hard. No sirens, no crying baby, just the ticking of the kitchen clock. I set the drive on the table and stared at it. It looked so ordinary, that tiny black thing, and yet it carried everything. Proof, danger, maybe even the reason my husband died. I almost didn't plug it in again. Almost. The screen glowed blue, files loading one by one. Inspection photos, emails, signed approvals, schematics of houses that no longer existed. Ethan had been tracking them for months. Each address circled in red, each ending with a date and the same initials, D.D. Dalton. Halfway through the folder was a video file labeled Maplewood Cam Footage. I hesitated, then clicked. The timestamp read 1 day before the fire. The camera pointed at our driveway. Ethan appeared, setting down his toolbox, glancing toward the house as if hearing something. He knelt, adjusted a small camera near the porch light, and looked straight into the lens. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it," he said, voice steady but eyes tired. "Dalton's burning homes for profit. He signs off on faulty wiring, then sends cleanup crews he owns. Grace, if this reaches you, trust the dog. Max senses accelerants. He can smell what we can't." The video ended abruptly with static. I sat frozen, the words echoing through the apartment. He knew. He knew the house was next. Oliver whimpered in his crib. I rushed to him, heart pounding. The nightlight flickered, casting strange shapes across the wall. For a moment, I thought I saw a silhouette, a dog sitting watch by the crib. When I blinked, it was gone. The following morning, I went back to the ruins on Maplewood. The police tape flapped weakly in the wind. Charred beams jutted from the foundation like broken ribs. I stood where the porch used to be, clutching Max's collar. "Show me what I'm missing," I whispered. A gust of wind kicked up ash. Among it, something glittered, metal fragments half buried in soot. I knelt and brushed them aside until my fingers found a small, melted canister. Gasoline residue. Ethan had been right. Someone had planted it. Footsteps crunched behind me. I spun around. Chief Dalton stood by the fence, raincoat dark and gleaming. "Mrs. Turner," he said smoothly, "you shouldn't be here. The structure's unsafe." I hid the canister behind my leg. I needed closure. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Closure's a dangerous thing. Sometimes it opens more than it heals. When I didn't answer, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your husband was obsessed. He made mistakes. Don't make them again. Is that a warning? A kindness?" He tipped his hat, turned, and walked away, leaving muddy footprints that steamed in the cold. I waited until his car disappeared before breathing again. My hands shook as I wrapped the canister in a plastic bag. If he was warning me, it meant he knew I'd found something. That night, I met Tanner at an empty diner on the edge of town. He looked exhausted, eyes darting toward the windows every few seconds. "You were right," I told him, sliding the bag across the table. "Accelerant. Same kind used in the other fires." He nodded grimly. "Dalton's running an insurance kickback loop. But he's protected. We need undeniable proof. I have Ethan's video. Then you have a target on your back," he said. Don't stay at your apartment tonight. Before I could reply, a low growl vibrated through the floor. We both looked toward the entrance, expecting a stray dog, but the doorway was empty. The growl faded into the hum of the neon lights. Tanner exhaled. He's still watching you, isn't he? I wanted to laugh, to say ghosts weren't real, but the air smelled faintly of smoke and wet fur. Back home, I packed essentials for Oliver and me: clothes, formula, the flash drive, Max's collar. As I zipped the bag, the baby monitor crackled again. Through the static came a man's voice, distorted but clear enough. Grace, run. The screen went black. Then smoke seeped under the apartment door. I grabbed Oliver and bolted. Flames licked up the hallway walls. Thin, blue, chemical. Someone had poured accelerant through the vents. The fire alarms were silent. I covered the baby with a blanket and sprinted down the stairs. The exit sign flickered once before dying. The heat grew unbearable, the air clawing at my throat. A beam fell ahead of me, blocking the path. I turned, searching for another way, but the stairwell was already filling with smoke. My vision blurred. Then, out of the haze, a shape moved. A golden glow, low to the ground. A wagging tail. Max, I whispered. The figure turned and bolted toward a side hallway. I followed, half blind, trusting whatever miracle led me through the fire once before. The door at the end burst open to the parking lot. Cold rain hit my face like salvation. I stumbled outside just as the building erupted behind me. Neighbors screamed. Sirens wailed again. Too late, always too late. I collapsed on the wet pavement, coughing, clutching Oliver. The collar around my wrist pulsed with heat, though it had no power source. When I looked up, the golden light by the doorway flickered once, then faded. By dawn, the building was nothing but charred concrete. Investigators called it faulty wiring. The same phrase again. But now I knew better. Someone had tried to finish what they started. I stared at the rising sun, holding Oliver tight. They think they burned the truth, I murmured. They don't know what fire taught me. The wind shifted, carrying a faint bark across the ruins. I smiled through tears. Good boy, I whispered. We're not done yet. The second fire turned the world against sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw blue flames climbing walls, Oliver's blanket glowing in the dark, and the shimmer of a dog leading us out. When daylight came, it felt thinner, like light poured through smoke that refused to clear. The investigators called the apartment blaze another electrical malfunction. 2 in 2 months. Same explanation. Same shrug. I stood in the rain outside the wreckage holding Oliver close, wondering how many accidents a person could survive before fate started to look like a hit list. Tanner found me there, hair dripping under his hood. You need to disappear for a while, he said. Dalton's rattled. He knows you're alive, and he knows you're digging. I'm not running again, I told him. Ethan didn't, and neither did Max. He sighed. Then at least let me help. There's someone I trust, retired arson investigator, name's Marla Hayes. She used to train the K-9 units. If anyone can tell us what your husband saw, it's her. We met Marla that night in a barn at the edge of town. The air smelled of hay and kerosene. Rows of old fire training dummies stood like ghosts in the half-light. Marla herself looked carved from smoke. Gray hair, fierce eyes, voice roughened by years of shouting over sirens. She listened as I told the whole story. Ethan's files, the flash drive, Dalton's threats, Max's impossible rescues. When I finished, she leaned forward, elbows on knees. Dogs don't forget fire, she said. If Max went back in, he smelled accelerant. They're trained to track it, same as blood. Your husband must have used him as a warning system. She opened a locker and handed me a small evidence jar. Inside sat a scrap of melted red cloth, the remains of Max's bandana. The lab I trust found traces of gasoline compounds on this. Same formula the department's been using for controlled burns. Only someone with station access could get it. Dalton. My throat tightened. Can you prove it? Marla's eyes softened. Proof's tricky when men like him sign the reports. But patterns tell stories. We just have to follow the heat. She unrolled a map across the table. Dozens of red pins dotted the county, each marking a fire Ethan had logged. At the center of every cluster sat one name, Dalton Contracting LLC. I stared at the map until the pins blurred. He burned them, I whispered. He burned families to rebuild and collect. Marla nodded. And your husband was getting too close. Outside, thunder rumbled again, low and familiar. The barn lights flickered once. I felt a breeze brush my ankle, a soft whoosh, like a wagging tail passing by. Marla looked up. You feel that? Yeah, I said quietly. He's here. Over the next few days, we worked in secret. Tanner pulled old inspection reports from the station archives. Marla traced shipments of accelerant chemicals to a warehouse registered under Dalton's wife's name. Every thread led back to the same firehouse badge. I stopped pretending I wasn't afraid. Fear kept me sharp. Every time I tucked Oliver into bed at Marla's spare room, I whispered, "We're almost there, baby. Daddy's watching." On the fourth night, Tanner called. His voice shook. Dalton knows about the drive. He's cleaning house. Anyone who helped Ethan. He's coming for the evidence. Before I could respond, tires screeched outside the barn. Headlights cut through the slats, slicing across Marla's map. She killed the lantern. Back door now, she hissed. I grabbed Oliver from his crib and ducked behind the hay bales. The barn door groaned open. Boots crunched on gravel. Dalton's voice carried, calm and poisonous. "Grace Turner, you think you're a hero now? You're playing with fire you can't control." He moved deeper inside. A glint of metal, his lighter, the same engraved model Ethan used to carry. The sound of the flames snapping to life echoed through the rafters. I pressed Oliver to my chest and whispered a prayer. Then, from somewhere above us, came a low, warning growl. Dalton froze. What the? The growl rose into a bark that shook dust from the beams. A shape leapt from the loft, a blur of gold and smoke. The lighter clattered to the floor, skidding toward me. Dalton cursed, stumbling backward, gun half drawn, eyes wide at the thing he couldn't name. The apparition landed hard, scattering embers from the hay. For a heartbeat, the barn filled with the scent of wet fur and ozone. Dalton fired once, twice, both shots splitting air. The golden form lunged, knocking the weapon aside, then vanished into sparks. Dalton screamed, clutching his hand, blood shining under the flickering bulb. "You people are insane." Marla stepped from the shadows, shotgun steady. "No," she said. "Just tired of your kind." He bolted through the door. Tires screamed again as his car tore into the night. Silence fell. My pulse thundered in my ears. I looked at Marla. She was shaking too. On the ground where the apparition had stood, Max's tag gleamed untouched, clean as new. The word Guardian glowed faintly in the dark. Marla crossed herself. "I trained that dog," she whispered. "He used to bark at me for treats. Guess he's still earning them." I picked up the tag, feeling its warmth pulse against my skin. He's protecting the truth. Before dawn, we packed everything. The map, the jar, the flash drive, and left the barn. I didn't look back until we reached the highway. The old structure stood silhouetted against the sunrise, thin trails of smoke curling from its roof where Dalton's lighter had fallen. Not a blaze this time, just a warning. The story wasn't over. As the road opened ahead, Oliver stirred in his car seat and let out a soft laugh. I smiled through the tears that kept finding me. "Almost there, baby," I whispered. Almost to the end of the fire. Behind us, somewhere in the wind, came the faintest echo of paws on gravel, steady, patient, leading us forward. Rain chased me all the way home that night, a steady hiss that sounded too much like the fire. The flash drive burned a line through my jacket pocket as if it still held heat from Ethan's hands. When I closed the apartment door behind me, the quiet hit hard. No sirens, no crying baby, just the ticking of the kitchen clock. I set the drive on the table and stared at it. It looked so ordinary, that tiny black thing, and yet it carried everything. Proof, danger, maybe even the reason my husband died. I almost didn't plug it in again. Almost. The screen glowed blue, files loading one by one. Inspection photos, emails, signed approvals, schematics of houses that no longer existed. Ethan had been tracking them for months. Each address circled in red, each ending with a date and the same initials, D.D. Dalton. Halfway through the folder was a video file labeled Maplewood Cam Footage. I hesitated, then clicked. The timestamp read 1 day before the fire. The camera pointed at our driveway. Ethan appeared, setting down his toolbox, glancing toward the house as if hearing something. He knelt, adjusted a small camera near the porch light, and looked straight into the lens. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it, he said, voice steady but eyes tired. Dalton's burning homes for profit. He signs off on faulty wiring, then sends cleanup crews he owns. Grace, if this reaches you, trust the dog. Max senses accelerants. He can smell what we can't. The video ended abruptly with static. I sat frozen, the words echoing through the apartment. He knew. He knew the house was next. Oliver whimpered in his crib. I rushed to him, heart pounding. The nightlight flickered, casting strange shapes across the wall. For a moment, I thought I saw a silhouette, a dog sitting watch by the crib. When I blinked, it was gone. The following morning, I went back to the ruins on Maplewood. The police tape flapped weakly in the wind. Charred beams jutted from the foundation like broken ribs. I stood where the porch used to be, clutching Max's collar. Show me what I'm missing, I whispered. A gust of wind kicked up ash. Among it, something glittered, metal fragments half buried in soot. I knelt and brushed them aside until my fingers found a small, melted canister. Gasoline residue. Ethan had been right. Someone had planted it. Footsteps crunched behind me. I spun around. Chief Dalton stood by the fence, raincoat dark and gleaming. Mrs. Turner, he said smoothly. You shouldn't be here. The structure's unsafe. I hid the canister behind my leg. I needed closure. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Closure's a dangerous thing. Sometimes it opens more than it heals. When I didn't answer, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. Your husband was obsessed. He made mistakes. Don't make them again. Is that a warning? A kindness? He tipped his hat, turned, and walked away, leaving muddy footprints that steamed in the cold. I waited until his car disappeared before breathing again. My hands shook as I wrapped the canister in a plastic bag. If he was warning me, it meant he knew I'd found something. That night, I met Tanner at an empty diner on the edge of town. He looked exhausted, eyes darting toward the windows every few seconds. You were right, I told him, sliding the bag across the table. Accelerant. Same kind used in the other fires. He nodded grimly. Dalton's running an insurance kickback loop. But he's protected. We need undeniable proof. I have Ethan's video. Then you have a target on your back, he said. Don't stay at your apartment tonight. Before I could reply, a low growl vibrated through the floor. We both looked toward the entrance, expecting a stray dog, but the doorway was empty. The growl faded into the hum of the neon lights. Tanner exhaled. He's still watching you, isn't he? I wanted to laugh, to say ghosts weren't real, but the air smelled faintly of smoke and wet fur. Back home, I packed essentials for Oliver and me, clothes, formula, the flash drive, Max's collar. As I zipped the bag, the baby monitor crackled again. Through the static came a man's voice, distorted but clear enough. Grace, run. The screen went black. Then smoke seeped under the apartment door. I grabbed Oliver and bolted. Flames licked up the hallway walls. Thin, blue, chemical. Someone had poured accelerant through the vents. The fire alarms were silent. I covered the baby with a blanket and sprinted down the stairs. The exit sign flickered once before dying. The heat grew unbearable, the air clawing at my throat. A beam fell ahead of me, blocking the path. I turned, searching for another way, but the stairwell was already filling with smoke. My vision blurred. Then, out of the haze, a shape moved. A golden glow, low to the ground. A wagging tail. Max, I whispered. The figure turned and bolted toward a side hallway. I followed, half blind, trusting whatever miracle led me through the fire once before. The door at the end burst open to the parking lot. Cold rain hit my face like salvation. I stumbled outside just as the building erupted behind me. Neighbors screamed. Sirens wailed again. Too late, always too late. I collapsed on the wet pavement, coughing, clutching Oliver. The collar around my wrist pulsed with heat, though it had no power source. When I looked up, the golden light by the doorway flickered once, then faded. By dawn, the building was nothing but charred concrete. Investigators called it faulty wiring. The same phrase again. But now I knew better. Someone had tried to finish what they started. I stared at the rising sun, holding Oliver tight. They think they burned the truth, I murmured. They don't know what fire taught me. The wind shifted, carrying a faint bark across the ruins. I smiled through tears. Good boy, I whispered. We're not done yet. By Thursday, the whole town was bracing for rain. Storm clouds rolled low over the rooftops. pressing down on Maplewood like a held breath. I watched them gather from the diner window, nursing the same cup of coffee until it went cold. Oliver slept in his stroller beside me, his small fingers twitching in dreams. Every thunderclap made him flinch, and I couldn't help flinching too. Friday. That was tomorrow. Dalton's next job. I had no plan, just a promise. The note from Ethan stayed folded in my pocket, edges soft from my hands. The community center sat on the edge of town, an old brick building turned shelter for kids with nowhere else to go. I drove there before sunset and parked across the street, pretending to check my phone while counting exits, windows, security lights. Inside, children's laughter floated through the cracked windows like music before a tragedy. Marla hadn't called since the lake. I still didn't know if she was alive. Tanner's number went straight to voicemail. Every ally was disappearing one by one, burned away by the same man who'd taken everything from me. But even alone, I felt less alone than before. Sometimes I'd catch that scent, rain on fur, or feel the faint brush of air beside my hand, as if someone unseen were keeping pace. It didn't scare me anymore. As night fell, I parked closer. The street emptied. The center's lights flickered once, then dimmed. I saw a shadow slip around the back gate, tall, sure, wearing a fire jacket. Dalton. He moved with purpose, carrying a duffel bag heavy enough to bend his arm. I followed at a distance, shoes silent against the wet pavement. My heart beat in sync with the rain. He cut across the playground, crouched near the wall, and unscrewed the cap of a canister. The smell hit me, gasoline. He was setting the next blaze. For a second, fear froze me. Every instinct screamed to run, to grab Oliver and vanish before the match struck. But another image replaced it. Ethan's steady hands tightening the bolts of the crib, Max bursting through the flames, that bark cutting through the smoke like faith-made sound. Not again. I crept closer until I could hear Dalton humming under his breath. Calm, tuneless. He poured a thin line of fuel along the foundation, tracing it toward the propane tank near the fence. When he stood to light his match, I stepped out from behind the swings. Looking for this, I said, holding up the engraved lighter I'd taken from him at the barn. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing. Mrs. Turner, he said softly, almost kindly, you should have stayed buried with your house. You burned it, I said. You burned all of them. He smiled. Rebirth, Grace. Old structures fall, new ones rise. That's progress. You killed Ethan. He tilted his head. Your husband died chasing ghosts. I just made sure they found him first. I wanted to lunge at him, to claw that smile from his face, but Oliver's faint whimper from the car held me still. There are children inside, I said. You'll kill them. They won't feel a thing, he said, flicking a match. Just light and air. A wind rose from nowhere, hard enough to snuff the flame before it could catch. Dalton frowned, shielding the next match. Another gust slammed into him, scattering his fuel can across the yard. He cursed, spinning in the rain. Who's there? I didn't move. Behind him, the swing set creaked once, twice. A low growl rippled through the night. Dalton turned, gun drawn, eyes wide. What the hell? A shape burst from the darkness, gold and smoke, eyes burning bright. Max. The apparition hit him full force, knocking him into the mud. The gun went flying. Dalton screamed, arms flailing at air that fought back. I ran, kicked the gun away, grabbed the duffel, dumped its contents, fuses, timers, accelerant cans. One still ticking. I tore the wires loose and threw it into the puddle. Sparks hissed, died. Dalton rolled over, blood on his face, eyes wild. He's dead. That dog is dead. Then who's holding you down? I asked. His scream answered for me. He swung blindly, connected with nothing, then scrambled to his feet and ran for the truck. I chased him, slipping on the wet asphalt. He reached the driver's seat, slammed the door, engine roaring to life. I pounded on the window. You won't get away this time. He aimed the truck straight at me. Headlights blinded everything. I froze. The horn blared. Then bark. The sound hit like thunder. A golden blur streaked across the hood, smashing into the windshield. Dalton swerved. The truck hit the hydrant, flipped once, and crashed into the fence. Fire burst from the engine, roaring upward. I crawled toward the wreckage. Dalton hung half out the window, coughing blood, eyes glassy. You think this ends with me? He spat. The contracts go higher. You'll never stop it. I looked past him at the flames licking closer to the propane tank. Then I'll die trying. I yanked the door open, dragged him out onto the pavement just before the tank blew. The explosion rocked the street, showering sparks across the playground. Fire spread, but this time the sirens were already coming. The world glowed orange again, but this time I wasn't trapped. I was the one pulling someone else out. Dalton gasped beside me, broken and small. "You don't understand," he rasped. "Your husband was part of it." My heart stuttered. "What?" "He signed the first one," Dalton croaked, "to fund his research. He didn't mean for it to go that far." His words dissolved in a cough. Then nothing. I stared at him, at the ruin of the man who had stolen everything, and felt the fire's reflection dancing across my wet hands. "Ethan?" "No. He wouldn't." The firefighters arrived, flooding the scene with foam and light. I turned toward the playground, expecting only smoke and ruin. But standing in the center, watching me with calm, unwavering eyes, was Max. His fur shimmered gold, his red bandana whole again. "Good boy," I whispered. "It's over." He wagged his tail once and looked past me. I turned to follow his gaze. Through the steam, I saw Ethan, smiling, clean, exactly as he'd been the day we met. He lifted his hand in silent goodbye. When I blinked, they were both gone. Rain began to fall, washing the fire into memory. I sank to my knees beside the wreckage, clutching the lighter, the tag, the ring, all that was left of the men who'd fought the flames. Oliver stirred in my arms, eyes opening. His first word was a whisper, "Dog." The rain didn't stop for 2 days.
"Yeah,"
It drummed
I said
against
softly.
the hospital
"Dog."
windows like it was trying to remind me of everything I'd tried to forget. I sat by Oliver's bed, watching the four drip, replaying Dalton's last words on an endless loop. "Your husband was part of it." Part of it. The phrase gnawed through every defense I had left. Ethan's face, his steady smile, his calm voice, blurred in my mind with the sound of Dalton's dying laugh. The hero I loved and the man who might have lit the first spark started to look like the same person. A detective came by on the second morning. Detective Ruiz, short, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who had learned to live without sleep. "We got the files," he said. "Your husband's drive matches Dalton's records. You were right about the insurance loop." "So it's over?" I asked. Ruiz hesitated. "Mostly, but there's something else. You should see this." He set a folder on the table and opened it. Inside were bank records. My husband's name. His signature. A deposit from a shell company owned by Dalton's firm. Large enough to buy a lifetime of silence. I stared until the numbers lost shape. He said it was research money. He was trying to prove the wiring defects were intentional. Ruiz's expression softened. Maybe that's how it started. After he left, I sat there for a long time. The hospital's white noise filled the silence. Beeping monitors, wheels rolling, a child crying down the hall. Oliver slept peacefully, tiny chest rising and falling like the smallest, purest proof that love could survive even this. I reached into my bag and pulled out the burned lighter. "For truth," the engraving said. Maybe that's what Ethan had meant. Truth, no matter who it burned. That night, unable to sleep, I drove to the remains of the community center. The ruins were still damp, the air heavy with the smell of wet ash. I walked through what was left, a flashlight trembling in my hand. My reflection in the broken glass looked like a stranger wearing grief as armor. In the middle of the blackened floor lay something silver. I knelt and brushed away the soot. A flash drive, half melted but intact. I recognized it instantly. Ethan's. Another one. When I got back to the car, I plugged it into my laptop. A single video played. The timestamp, 1 week before the first fire. Ethan sat at his desk, eyes bloodshot, face tired. "If you're seeing this, Grace," he said. Then I failed. I took Dalton's money to fund the Maplewood tests, but when I realized what he was doing, I tried to stop it. The wiring defects, they weren't mistakes. They were triggers. Each installation is built to ignite with one surge. I thought if I exposed him, I could save everyone. I was wrong. He found out. He's coming for us. He looked off-screen, at something, someone, then back at the camera. "I'm sorry, love. For everything. If I don't make it, tell Oliver I was trying to protect him. Trust the dog." The video ended. I pressed my palms to my face and wept until I couldn't breathe. I wasn't crying just for the loss of Ethan. but for the terrible grace of knowing that even the purest intentions can start with a wrong choice. He tried to make it right, and it had cost him everything. When I looked up, the car windows were fogged. A shape moved in the mist outside, broad shoulders, golden fur. Max. I stepped out into the rain. You knew all along, didn't you? I whispered. He stood at the edge of the ruins, silent, luminous, watching. The wind caught his bandana and sent it fluttering like a flag. I knelt, tears mixing with rain. Thank you for saving us. For saving him too. Max tilted his head. For a moment, I could almost hear him breathe. Behind me, a soft voice said. He always knew where the truth was buried. I turned. Marla stood there, alive but limping, her jacket singed at the sleeve. Dalton's men tried to finish the job after you left, she said. They didn't. Guess your guardian still knows how to bite. I hugged her, relief and disbelief colliding. I thought you were gone. Not yet, she said, wincing. But we've got one more thing to finish. Dalton wasn't lying entirely. There are names above his, contractors, investors, politicians, and one file that can expose them all. She handed me a sealed envelope. Connor sent it before he died. It's time the world sees what your husband died for. The envelope was labeled Fireline, complete report. Take it to the press, Marla said. But be ready. They won't let you go quietly. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating Max behind her, tail wagging once before fading like a candle flame. The thunder followed a second later, echoing through the ruins. Marla nodded toward where he'd stood. You know what that means. I smiled faintly through tears. He's saying it's time. By dawn, we were driving toward the city. Oliver cooed softly from the back seat, the horizon lighting up with the first gold of morning. The envelope lay on the dashboard between us. I could almost feel Ethan's hand over mine as I drove, steady and warm. When smoke remembers, I murmured, it doesn't choke, it guides. Marla looked at me sideways. Poetic. Are you planning to write all this down someday? Maybe, I said. Someone has to remind people what heroes really look like. She smiled. And sometimes they've got paws. We laughed, but it broke into silence quickly. The road stretched out in front of us, wet and endless, like a scar healing slowly. Behind us, the sun rose over the blackened skeletons of the town, turning even the ruins to gold. And somewhere in that light, I swore I heard a single bark. By the time we reached Charleston, steady, the rain had thinned to a silver mist. It felt like the city itself was holding its breath. The Post and Ledger towered above the harbor, its glass windows streaked with dawn. Marla parked 2 blocks away and killed the engine. You still have the file? She asked. I patted the envelope in my jacket. Everything Ethan died for. She nodded once. Then you walk in there, hand it to the editor, and don't look back. I'll watch the car. I looked at Oliver sleeping in his seat, cheeks flushed from the long ride. If anything happens. Nothing's going to happen, Marla said. Not after all this. But the way she looked at the rearview mirror told me she didn't believe it either. I stepped into the street, the envelope tight in my hand. The city was just waking, vendors rolling up shutters, gulls circling the docks. I was halfway to the lobby when I noticed the sedan parked across from the entrance. Tinted windows. Engine idling. Dalton's badge didn't die with him. Someone higher had taken the wheel. Inside, the lobby smelled of wet concrete and ink. I told the receptionist I had evidence for the investigation's editor. She frowned at the soot-stained envelope, then picked up the phone. Mr. Roth, you'd better come down here. Roth arrived moments later, tall, tired, ink on his cuffs. You said you've got proof on the fire contracts? I nodded. It connects Dalton, the insurance company, and 3 councilmen. Everything's inside. Publish it. He flipped through the first few pages, eyes widening. This could take down half the board. That's the idea. He looked up. You understand what this means for you? Yeah, I said. It means Ethan can finally rest. We never saw the men come in until it was too late. 2 of them. Black coats, quiet steps. One carried a pistol fitted with a suppressor. Roth's eyes went wide. I barely had time to push him aside before the first shot cracked through the air and shattered the glass wall behind us. People screamed. The second bullet punched into the marble counter, spraying dust. I grabbed the folder and ran. The elevator was too slow, so I took the stairs. Boots thundered behind me. My breath came in ragged bursts, each step echoing louder than the last. The stairwell door above me slammed open, a third man blocking the exit. I spun back down a floor, burst through a maintenance corridor, and found myself in the loading dock. Rain poured through the open bay doors. Marla's truck idled across the street, door open, engine still running. She saw me and shouted, "Grace, move." I sprinted. Behind me, a gun barked again. A crate exploded, splinters slicing my arm. Pain blurred the edges of everything. I dove into the truck, slammed the door. Marla floored it. Tires screamed against wet asphalt as we tore through the intersection. Bullets chased us down the block. Then, from somewhere behind, a horn blared. A semi clipping the sedan that had been tailing us. Metal screamed. The car spun out, crashed into a lamppost, burst into sparks. Marla laughed once, breathless. Guess somebody up there still likes us. But as we cleared the bridge out of downtown, flames bloomed in the rearview mirror. The sedan had ruptured its tank. Fire was climbing the night again, chasing the rain. I watched it fade until the smoke became a single dark column against the sky. At the motel on the outskirts, we patched my arm with first aid tape. The envelope sat on the table between us, damp and smudged but unburned. "They'll keep coming," I said. Marla poured whiskey into 2 paper cups. "Then we keep moving until it's printed. Tomorrow I know a radio contact who can stream it live." I nodded, but sleep came in flashes. Ethan's voice, Dalton's sneer, the sound of Max barking through smoke. Just before dawn, the motel fire alarm shrieked. I grabbed Oliver, stumbled into the hall. The air stank of gas again. Marla burst from the next room, coughing. They found us. We ran for the exit. The lobby windows glowed orange. A figure waited in the parking lot, one of the shooters from the paper, gun glinting under the streetlight. I froze. He aimed. Then the earth itself seemed to bark. A golden blur shot from between the cars, knocking him sideways. The gun went off, hitting nothing. The man screamed as his weapon flew into the darkness. When the lights steadied, the lot was empty except for the gun on the asphalt and the echo of paws retreating toward the trees. "Go!" Marla shouted. We jumped into the truck and peeled onto the highway. Sirens rose behind us, but this time they weren't chasing. They were coming to douse another of Dalton's fires. I looked back once. The motel roof collapsed inward, sparks spiraling into the pale sky. For a heartbeat, the flames formed a shape. For legs, a wagging tail. A guardian running ahead. By midday, the story was everywhere. Roth had escaped with a copy of the files and gone live on the Post and Ledger stream. The headline scrolled across every screen. "Arson scandal exposed. City officials under investigation." I watched from a roadside diner, Oliver asleep against my chest, Marla at the next booth murmuring with the state police. My coffee had gone cold again, but this time I didn't mind. Ethan's face appeared on the broadcast, one of the archived photos from his firefighter days, smiling in the old uniform. Beneath it, the words, "Whistleblower victim." My throat tightened. The truth was out. Finally. Outside, the rain had stopped. Steam rose from the road, curling upward like smoke set free. I stepped out onto the porch, the smell of wet asphalt filling my lungs. "We did it," I whispered. "It's over." A breeze stirred, warm and soft. Somewhere close, a single bark answered. Not loud, not ghostly, just enough to make me smile. "Good boy," I said. "You can rest now." Behind me, Marla opened the door. "Are you ready to go home?" I looked toward the distant hills where the town waited to rebuild, where ashes were already giving way to green shoots. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go home. My name is Grace Turner." It's been 7 years since the night everything burned. People still stop me sometimes, at the park, at the clinic, in the grocery store. They recognize me from the documentaries, the interviews, the photo of a woman in a rain-soaked coat, holding a baby outside a burning house. They always ask the same question: how did you survive? I never know how to answer. Because the truth is, I didn't, not all of me. The woman who lived on Maplewood Lane died in that fire. The one who walked out was someone new, built from smoke and scars and the memory of a golden dog who refused to let us die. Oliver's 8 now. He runs faster than I can keep up, always laughing, always chasing the light. Every night before bed, he leaves a biscuit on the porch. Says it's for Max, in case he gets hungry flying around heaven. I tell him dogs don't need food up there. They've got love instead, but he leaves it anyway. Maybe he's right. Maybe love still gets hungry sometimes. The city rebuilt the community center. They named it Max's Haven. There's a bronze statue by the gate. A golden retriever sitting tall, bandana around his neck, eyes fixed on something far away. Kids rub his head for luck when they walk in. The caretakers swear the bronze stays warm, even in winter. Ethan has his own memorial down by the river, the Firefighter's wall. His name is etched beside Connor's and Tanner's. Marla visits every year with me. She's old now, slower, but her eyes still burn bright when she talks about her boys. After the scandal broke, half the city council resigned. The insurance company collapsed. For a while, every headline carried words like justice and reform. But that's not what I remember most. What I remember is silence, the first morning after it was all over. The quiet hum of a world that had survived itself. Standing in the ruins of our old house, Oliver on my hip, the air smelled of wet soil and ash. It should have felt empty. Instead, it felt sacred, like something had been purified rather than destroyed. I built a new home not far from that spot. Nothing fancy, just white walls, soft light, a porch that faces the sunrise. The first thing I planted was daisies, the same kind that grew around Max's grave. When they bloom, I swear the air carries that faint warm scent of fir after rain. Sometimes at night, when the wind hits the eaves just right, I hear a single bark echo through the fields. Oliver hears it too. He always smiles and says, "He's checking on us, Mom." And maybe that's true. Maybe guardians don't vanish. They just change form. I've spent the last few years writing about what happened. Not the fires themselves, but what came after. About how courage doesn't roar. It breathes, quietly, through people who refuse to stay down. I call the book When Smoke Remembers. It's not a story about loss, really. It's about what loss can make. People ask if I ever forgave Ethan for his mistake. I tell them forgiveness isn't a door you open once. It's a field you keep crossing, every day, barefoot, through the ashes. Some mornings I reach the other side. Some days I don't. But I keep walking. Because love, even the kind that burns, is still love. Marla passed away last spring. She asked to be buried near the memorial garden where Max first saved me. The headstone reads, "She fought fire with truth." I visit on quiet Sundays, lay flowers, and sit until the breeze starts to shift. The wind always carries the smell of smoke, but softer now, sweeter, like memory, not destruction. Oliver likes to tell people his dad was a firefighter and his best friend was a ghost dog. When teachers ask if that story's true, he grins and says, "You'd have to see for yourself." I still keep the lighter on my desk. The engraving's worn now, but the words are clear enough, for truth. Every time I light a candle, I whisper a thank you to everyone who carried me through that fire, man, woman, or dog. The flame flickers, then steadies, and I feel them all there in the quiet. Ethan's steady breath, Marla's laugh, Connor's strength, and Max's tail thumping softly against the floorboards of a world only half unseen. Sometimes I wonder if there's a heaven for those who save others. If there is, I hope the gates swing wide and the fields are endless, full of open sky and running water and toys that never burn. And I hope, when my time comes, I'll hear paws on gravel before I see anything else. Because if faith taught me anything, it's that heroes come in many shapes, and sometimes the purest souls walk on four legs. So when people ask how I survived, I finally know what to tell them. I didn't survive alone. Every story about fire is really a story about love, because both will burn you alive just to prove they exist. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment for more HeroPaws rescue stories.